Was on the inside fighting the virus and crafting America's pandemic response as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Joining us now is former Executive Secretary and Chief of Staff of the U.S. National Security Council, General Keith Kellogg. General, thanks for being with us tonight.
Jen, thanks for having me.
Just want to go back to this time last year and talk about your experience on the White House COVID task force and also your experience with Dr. Fauci, the news that's coming out the past week here. And are you surprised by any of it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it needs a lot of look. At the very start, I was part of the coronavirus task force. The ad hoc task force, we started with Mick Mulvaney, the White House Chief of Staff, and Secretary Azar, and then we moved it into the task force that was led by the Vice President, where we put a doctors group together that had several doctors. We had Fauci, we had Birx, we had Redfield was there as well, Tony Fauci, Stephen Hahn, and the rest of them. Early on, when this was starting to break, we went into the Oval Office and we were talking to the President, and something wasn't right to us, those of us that were not doctors. We were looking at the Chinese, and they were not very cooperative in giving us any information. But we watched them shut down the city of Wuhan. That is a city of 11 million. Geographically, it's 5 times the size of London. They quarantined it with their military. They built hospitals overnight. They took sick patients, forcibly removed them, put them into hospitals. Wuhan also happens to be the home of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is the BSL 4 level lab, biosafety level 4 lab, that was studying coronaviruses and also working on gain of function, how to make a virus more lethal, more transmittable. So we were looking at it and said, something's not right here. And we had Matt Pottinger come in, who was the Deputy National Security Advisor, and he says, the Chinese are lying to you. Something's going on there, not telling us about it. So as we went forward with this lack of transparency, I'm a big believer is there was some type of inadvertent release that came out of that lab with the coronavirus and was transmitted out. I know early on, there was people who said it was not possible. I don't buy into that. I think there were some early studies that have now proven wrong. And I think Tony Fauci was part of that. And he didn't tell us some of the true background of the studies. You know, what I mean by that, there was a, I'm sorry.
General, let me ask you, please, let me ask you about Tony Fauci. You know, he has, despite what should be the embarrassment of these emails, he's remained omnipresent in the media. He had a rather outlandish statement yesterday. Let's have a listen.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. Because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. Sometimes those things were inconvenient truths for people, and there was pushback against me. So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science.
Wow. So, General Kelly, Dr. Fauci claims that he basically is the embodiment, the very embodiment of science itself, and to attack him is to attack the principles of science, apparently. Your reaction?
Yeah, frankly, Steve, that's garbage. Here's what I mean by that. When we listen to the doctors, early on, we followed the science, we listened to the doctors. Some of the doctors were not telling us the truth. Here's what I mean by that. There was a Lancet article that came out, that's a medical journal, and Tony Fauci was part of that, knowing who was writing the article. 27 scientists said it could not have come out of the lab. It was naturally generated. Now later they're saying, well, that's not true. It could have been, the possibility was an inadvertent transmission or something like that came out of it. Well, Tony never told us. He was closely aligned with that Lancet article, and he knew the people who drafted the article went forward. So he wasn't telling us the exact truth going forward. And he was always absolute in his comments. And I think he's now kind of retrenching a little bit on what he's saying. And he's now saying, oh, okay, well, if you don't trust science, you don't trust me. Well, I trust science. I'm not too sure I trust Tony Fauci anymore.
General, really quickly, there are calls to fire Fauci. Should he be required to at least testify under oath?
Well, I think the latter is very important. I think he should testify under oath. And I think his time is over. I think they should move on. I think they should also move Francis Collins as well. It's time to put a new group in there. Let's restart it. Let's investigate. Let's find out where this thing actually came from, was in a release, an inadvertent release that came out of that laboratory. I think the American people deserve it. 600,000 dead Americans deserve it.
Right. General Kellogg, that is fantastic insider information and perspective. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Jim.
Patriots, what if I told you